Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Anabaptists, and we're going to get through the effects of the Reformation on the role of women. All right? So when we're looking at this, during this time period, you've been seeing a bunch of different groups pop up. You've been seeing a bunch of different people have different ideas about how the church should look. And we saw another group pop up during this time period called the Anabaptists, not the Baptists, right? Today we have a church called the Baptist Church. All right, yes, that is a Protestant church, but it's not the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists were just this group that was back then. And so that's what we're talking about. So many of the Protestant reformers allowed the state government to play an important role in church affairs. Some people were against the state having any kind of power whatsoever. All right, so not that, like in America today, we have separation of church and state, right? Like, think about it. Our government, your president's never going to get up and say, we are a Catholic nation, right? We are a Muslim nation. They're not allowed to because we have that separation of church and state. You're allowed to worship any way you pretty much want. If I started a religion today, the religion of Venuto, you guys would be in trouble, but if you decided to follow that, right, I'm not the high priest of the religion of Venuto, you guys could fall in love with that, and, we're going to follow him forever. The government would not step in and go, no, you can't do that. The only reason they would step in is if, like, say, we were breaking the law. Make sense? All right, so the government doesn't give you a religion that you have to follow, and back then it was the same thing. There was a lot of people that thought we should be totally separated from the government, all right? One of those major groups was the Anabaptists, all right? These people were called Anabaptists. You can underline that. According to the Anabaptists, the true Christian church was a voluntary community. Hold on one second, got to answer my phone. Hello? He is not here today. Okay. So, according to the Anabaptists, the true Christian church was a voluntary community of adult believers. Believers, underline this, were first born spiritually, then baptized. All right, so an adult. All right, this belief in an adult baptism separated Anabaptists from the Catholics. The Catholics would baptize babies. They still do today, right? You go to a christening, they call it today, in the Catholic Church. All right, or a baptism. Christening is kind of like the really cool word that they use. But nowadays, there are a lot of churches that believe in adult baptism, meaning I'm an adult, I believe in this religion, Christianity, whatever, and I will now get baptized as an adult. I will make that decision. That the Anabaptists believe that, all right? There were still, hey, what's up? The nurse needs to see you, bud. Just walk over there. Or did you already see her?
No, not yet.
Okay, head on over there. Anabaptists based many of their beliefs on the practices of the accounts of the early Christian church in the New Testament. We see, if you were to read the New Testament, a lot of people down by riversides getting baptized. The person of Jesus, when he was 30 years old, went down to the river, got baptized. All right, so we see adults being baptized. They believe that all Christians were equal. So like the priest wasn't above them, the pastor wasn't above them. All right, each Anabaptist church chose its own spiritual leader, and because Christians were considered priests, any member of the community could be eligible to be a minister. Any person. All right, so in the church of, hey, how are you? In the church of Venuto, let's say, right? I'm not starting my own religion. Don't go home and tell everybody that. But in the church of Venuto, I could say, look, we're all eligible to be ministers. I'm not the only person that holds the truth. You know the answers, Jaleel. If you want to stand up and preach, we can choose you. As an adult community, we could say, we believe that Jaleel could do this. Does that make sense? All right, so that's vastly different than the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church had priests, and the priests were chosen, and that's who ran the church. Make sense? I don't know what that noise is. There's like a hissing. My computer won't work again. So it's a beautiful thing.
Oh, that's okay.
I thought you were here. No, no, my computers are muted. Everything's, and that's for some reason, I think somebody's messing with me. I've gotten to that point where I just think somebody's playing games with me. Because the computer will work for 3 minutes, and then somebody will go, and now I'm on video on YouTube, and that'll have all of this in there too. So maybe I'll get popular, and I can start the Church of Venuto. Who knows? So you'd be in real serious trouble. again, that's a pretty big deal. So if I were to ask you a question on a test or maybe an essay type thing, what set apart the Anabaptists from the Catholic faith or other Protestant faiths, you could tell me, well, anybody could be a minister. All were equal. They believed in adult baptism. Those are two very important things, very easy things to remember about the Anabaptists. Most Anabaptists believed in complete separation of church and state. Not just, we're us, you're the state, we don't want you involved in our religion, but literally total separation, meaning you have no control over us. We have our religion, that's what controls us. Do you think the state would be happy with that? What do you think? What do you think? Paul's shaking his head. I get a head shake. That's like the way that I get answers nowadays. But no, why? Why wouldn't they be happy with that? Veronica, why do you think the state, like if I said today, we're the Church of Venuto and the U.S. government, you have no say in our lives anymore. What do you think the U.S. government would have a problem with that? Why? Any guess? It could. I mean, I could choose to decide to go against other people's religions. That's a good, right? I could choose to say, we're going to kill all Catholics. And that's part of our faith, right? Do you understand? Like, that would be weird, right? But why else might the government want to step in and go, oh, wait a minute. You don't get to just choose to not listen to what? What do we have in this country? Laws, right? And we all adhere to laws. We have to, or else we have anarchy. We have craziness. Could you imagine if I was just like, I can do whatever I want because I'm an Anabaptist. I'm a Church of Venuto guy. These rules don't apply to me. I can speed. I can walk down the street and punch people in the face. I can start insurrections. That's the big word that's been going around. I can do all these things because I'm from the Church of Venuto. Right? Do you see how the government would probably step in and go, not happening. Yeah, right? They're going to have a problem with that, okay? Now, were the Anabaptists crazy people going around starting, fires for no reason and wanting to be bad? No. But the fact that they said, we don't want the state to have anything to do with us, it kind of made the antennas go up like, whoa, wait a minute, okay? So most Anabaptists believed in this complete. They thought that the government should be kept out of religion totally. Remember, at this time, religion was very intertwined with the state. Catholic faith, very important in state decisions. All right, so big deal. Wars were being started. We've already gone over that. They even thought that the government should not have any authority over real Christians. There's that law thing, right? Authority. Anabaptists, here's an interesting thing, refused to hold political office or bear arms, have firearms, weapons of some sort. So you can underline that. They never even wanted to be in politics. That's different. You don't see things like that today. Right? The big Georgia election that was a big deal just recently, one of the people that was sworn into office is Reverend Warnock. Reverend Warnock, which means he is a preacher. That is a vast difference from the Anabaptists. They would have never been a preacher, right? And we want to have political power because that's that blending of church and state. Right? A lot of people had a problem with George W. Bush years ago because he was an active, practicing, professing Christian. They had a problem with that. He would actually say, when they asked him about making decisions, he would say, well, I read my Bible, I prayed through my decision. And people would be like, what? You can't make decisions like that because we have this kind of mindset of this separation of church and state. Well, I think you can be a religion, right? Or practice, that's the way I should have said that, practice a religion and yet still make governmental decisions. Do we understand that? All right, but back then, the Anabaptists were like, we don't want to have anything to do with the state, and we don't want the state to have anything to do with us, so we won't try to gain power in the state, and we don't want you to have any power over us. Pretty simple. Vastly different from today, where we do see people running for office that are of certain faiths and wear them on their sleeves. I am turn on any news station today, and almost once a news conference with the White House, you will hear at least once, hopefully it will calm down, but a question will be asked and the answer will be from the press secretary, well, President Biden's a Catholic. Oh, okay. That good for him. Again, I have nothing against, I would tell you I'm a Christian if you were to ask me, but that shouldn't have any bearing on necessarily how I'm going to make that decision or that decision. Imagine if he came out and he said, because of my Catholic faith, we're going to be a Catholic nation. Pardon me, that's not how this works. No, cut it off. Can't do that. Make sense? Back the truck up, if you will. All right? So just understand that. Their political and religious beliefs caused the Anabaptists to be regarded as dangerous radicals. Now, these were a peaceful group of people. They didn't want guns. They didn't want, but because they were so against being a part of the state and having the state have any say in their lives, they were dangerous radicals. Make sense? All right, so weren't really dangerous people, but they were looked at as radical and dangerous. Think of a Martin Luther King Jr., right? Great man, did a lot of great things. He was considered dangerous by the United States government. Why?
Yeah, they say he was the most dangerous.
At the time, he was one of the most dangerous people. Why? Go ahead, Jaleel. Well, that's a major part of it. That, if you were going to go like, ABC, you would probably put A as being, he had such influence, right? And go a step further, at that time period, thankfully we don't have that, as I would say, as much anymore, but because he was black, you can't take that away from the equation, right? You have to, listen, I teach dirty history, right? Like I call a spade when here's what's real. He had a lot of influence and he was African American. He was also preaching what? Peace. Peace. We're going to be good. We're going to be quiet. We're going to go against the busing rules, and we're going to sit at tables that we're not supposed to sit at. We're going to march. Ooh. Think about how peaceful all of those things were, and yet he was considered a radical. We need to worry about this guy. It's the same. So why do we learn history? Well, if we don't, we're doomed to repeat it, right? We see these times where, we can today kind of pick out like, well, that dude's radical. That dude's radical. Well, their thought processes are weird, right? Back then, he was a peaceful guy, and he's awful. We need to go after him. We need to watch him, right? So it's a similar thing that we see if we allow ourselves to be overtaken by conspiracy theory or, we got to worry about them because they're different from us. You get into, it doesn't matter how different or why they're different, but that they're radical. We have to root them out. We have to get rid of that. And so we see this all the time. I hope it goes away at some point. Somebody's preaching peace, I'm on board. That's kind of the way I work, but does it work that way all the time? No. All right, so we'll keep rolling. There's one thing, it's the last line, you can underline it. The only thing that most Protestants and Catholics could agree on was the need to persecute Anabaptists. Isn't that funny? So the Protestants and Catholics fought wars, died, bled, didn't like each other, blah, 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 blah. But hey, those Anabaptists, we're on board. We don't like them together. Funny. The peaceful group, we don't like. Interesting. Tells you something about the human race, I think. The human nature of people as well. Effects of the role of women. Here we go. So you would think with all this change, women would get some comeuppance. Here we are, we're rising up in history. We're going to have some good things happen for us now, right? At this point, women were pretty much relegated to what? Taking care of the family, taking care of the home, yada, 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 right? Nothing, where I would say those are great things and they're very important still today. I believe those are important things that roles in the family are very important. But I would say this, at that point, you would think with all of this change, women would start gaining some power maybe, right? Out of the house in other forms, all right? Let's see what really happens. Protestants developed a new view of the family. Whoa, let's see. They did not believe that there was anything special or holy about being celibate, meaning not having children, all right? They did away with monasticism and the requirement of celibacy for the clergy. So now the clergy in a Protestant church could be married. If you go to church today, to any church other than the Catholic faith, you will see that the pastor can be married and have children, okay? Marriage and families were now emphasized, so they wanted that to happen. But the role of women, underlined, did not change very much. Interesting. Women were still subordinate to men. Women were expected to bear children and obey their husbands. Being a wife and a mother was still the only role that most Protestant women could play in a society. So even though with all this change, we still see kind of the thumb being pressed down and held down on a half of the human race, even within this faith. All right. Luckily, as time continued to go on, we see that change, even to the point now where, what did we make a big deal out of less than a month ago? What happened with our government? Who's in power now? Nobody knows? Who was sworn into office? Who? I can't hear you. Talk loud. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, right? Last time I checked, she's the first what? In our country. Nobody knows. This scares me, people. First female vice president ever. It's one of the highest ranking positions in our country, and first female president, or vice president, sorry. It's a pretty big deal, coming from a time when you couldn't do what? Anything other than raise children and be in the house. Again, very important things, but now we see that we are so far more advanced. I think you'll have a female president probably in my lifetime, hopefully. I mean, because it can happen and it should happen at some point. Other countries have had it. We act like it's this, this glass ceiling that we constantly have to keep breaking. But again, you can see that constantly. It was a big deal when President Obama got into office, right? Now that's not a woman, obviously, but why? Because he was the first African-American president. You start to see these glass ceilings get broken, and eventually it's not that big of a deal anymore. I hope we live in a country that it's not that big of a deal that a woman has a position of power, that a man has a position of power, that a black person has a position of power, whatever polka dot person has. But we're at a point where we're constantly trying to break those ceilings. We see here the women were not given a lot of power. And now we're seeing in our world today, not just in the United States, but just around the world, women hold many, 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 many very, 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 very powerful positions around the world. All right, so very interesting. All right, that's the end of the notes. All right, a little longer than most notes, but that's because I went through 2 sections. I banged them out. This makes me unlock a screen.